on to see.
Yeah, that's what I want to
I
do.
would say, yeah, do that one.
Okay.
And then we have to speak to Tim. There's supposed to be DVD, because we moved from here, everything got, there's supposed to be a DVD machine for each of the volunteers. And I have really good series, like I have Flight of Eagles, which is 4 discs of the whole fall of World War I, the fall of all those royal houses. And it's really well acted. It's BBC, so.
Yeah. Well, but if we organize that trip to the River Quay, I'm in.
We'll talk with suraphet and rent the van. Tell them we'd like to rent the van some Saturday.
Yeah. Well, so are we doing okay with dependent clauses? Did that explanation make sense to you? When to use when to use while, when to use before, when to use after, when to use if, when to use because, when to use because of. We're all clear. I can give you a test and we'll all pass with flying colors, right? Well, I'm not going to give you a test. But we will practice it some more. We will practice it some more, okay? Yes, Mom? Yes, I'll show.
I can. Every Chinese New Year Day, I will go to the church because I wish to pray for every father and sister, good health, good luck. After I will be the Holy and
Yes, very good. Let me show you. Here's your pen. Every Chinese Year I will go to the church because I wish to pray for my brother and my we would say sisters, good health,
and good luck.
and then that would end the sentence, okay? This is your clause, because I wish to pray. This tells you why you go. After, I will bring, okay? So this is your clause. The holy orange.
Come back.
I will bring the holy orange.
Good health.
Come back. Good. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. I think we're getting it. So, somebody give me an example of when we would use when, W-H-E-N, to introduce a dependent clause. Give me an example of when. Okay? Write a sentence and share it with the rest of the class. Okay?
I studied English when I was 20.
Excellent example. I studied English when I was 20. So, that tells us that suraphet began the study of English long ago. Now, this is a good example. This is an excellent example of why we would use when and why we would use while. Because when suraphet says, I studied English when I was 20, it tells us that when he was 20 years old, he studied English. But it doesn't tell us if he still is studying English. So if he wanted to tell us that he still is studying English, even though he began it at age 20, he would say, while. He'd say, I studied English. Well, the way we would say that, he would say, I began studying English when I was 20. And that tells us that he started when he was 20, and he still is studying English. So, good example. Very good example. Thank you. Can we come up with an example of a dependent clause that begins with the word after?
I enjoy my lunch after my English class.
Okay, I will enjoy my lunch after English class. Good example. Well, I think we have it. Let's turn to get our workbooks. Here's mine. Let's turn to page 72. Page 72. Page 72. And where it says tips for managing your time, this exercise, we're going to practice, and I want to call your attention to number 1. And you'll notice at number 1, there are 2 sentences. There are 2 sentences. And what we're going to do is to take those 2 sentences and combine them so that we have one sentence with a dependent clause. Let me give you an example. I'll do the first one. You have many things to do, period. That's one sentence. Make a to-do list. That's another sentence. So if we wanted to combine those 2 sentences into one sentence, using a dependent clause, we would say, when you have many things to do, make a to-do list. You see how this is going to work? So then let's try number 2. Chop, would you do number 2 for us? You have a deadline, write it on your calendar. Now, what we want to do is to combine those 2 sentences into one sentence using a dependent clause.
When you have a deadline, write it on your calendar.
Correct. When you have a deadline, write it on your calendar.
Teacher, what is
Yeah.
tips? Tip, what is tip? Tip, this one.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. You did it correctly. Oh, what is tips?
Yes.
Oh, tips? Do you know what tips are? You don't know tips? A tip. No, what is a tip? A tip is a helpful advice. So, for example, when Tessa told me when I visit the floating market, she gave me a tip. She said, make sure that I visit before noon and not visit, in the afternoon.
It's mean clue.
A clue, or it's advice.
Okay.
A tip is a very short piece of advice. So, a helpful tip is when I first came here, I was told to have your change ready, when you get on a bus, so that when the person comes and asks for the change, you have the change ready. You don't have to fumble around with your money and so on and so forth. A tip is advice.
Advice.
It's advice. Okay, let's see. Number 3. Kai, would you do number 3 for us?
When you need to concentrate, don't listen to ภาษา you need to ก่อน you need to when you need to concentrate ไม่ใช่ when อยู่ข้างหลังเอาเองว่าน่าซึ้งพอ when อยู่ข้างหลัง Don't let people interrupt you when you need to concentrate.
Correct. Yeah, very good. You see, in this case, we put the dependent clause at the end of the sentence. So we would say, don't let people interrupt you when you need to concentrate. Do you know what concentrate means? To think hard, to focus your mind. Uh-huh. That was good. Very good, Kai. Let's see. Ben, would you do the next one for us, please?
Yes. When you want to focus on a task, turn off the television.
Correct. See how what we're doing is we're taking two sentences and we're creating more meaning. We're giving the sentence more meaning by combining them and making one of those sentences a dependent clause. Ma, would you do the next one? This would be number 5.
When you feel tired, you take break.
Correct. When you feel tired, you take a break. Pew, would you do number 6?
Number 6, yeah. Keep yourself a reward when you finish something difficult.
Excellent. Now, did you notice that when the dependent clause is at the beginning of the sentence, there's a comma after the clause? And when the dependent clause is at the end of the sentence, there is no comma. That's just, it's a convention. Remember, Nam asked me why we do it that way. I don't know. It's just a convention. It's just the way the language evolved.